Hello, lovely people. Welcome to another book chat, the regular roundup of stuff I have read at some point in my past.
Sophie Vlogs.
I have 4 books to talk about this week, 1 fiction, 3 non-fiction. So I'll kick off with my fiction. This is Mrs. De Winter by Susan Hill, which is billed as the sequel to Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. My friend lent this to me. I had some mixed feelings on this book. It was an interesting reading experience, I will say that. This is the second book I've read that is drawing upon Rebecca. The other one is Rebecca's Tale by Sally Beauman, and very much reading this, I feel like these two texts were in conversation with each other because they're both doing this thing where like neither of them are written by the original author. They've both gained approval from the du Maurier estate to publish the book, and so it was interesting to see the different approaches. I've ended up thinking that I prefer Rebecca's Tale. I gave this a 2 stars. So Rebecca is a novel by Daphne du Maurier. It is a classic. It is one of my favourite books. It follows this nameless narrator who marries this much older man called Maxim de Winter when she is off on the continent being a lady's maid, and then they come back to his estate called Mandalay, and while she's there, it's like the ghost of his first wife Rebecca still has this real presence in the text and in the house. It's almost like our narrator is being like haunted by the echoes of this woman who was adored by so many. The book has some twists and turns. It goes on a tale. I won't mention where it ends. This book is set 10 years after the end of that book. And I thought Susan Hill did a really good job of sort of nailing like the heavy descriptive writing that du Maurier had in Rebecca. So one of the things I love about Rebecca is in real like classic Gothic fashion, Mandalay has such a presence. It's like the physical setting is an extra character in the book. There is so much description given to the plants and the nature and the house itself. There is a lot of like heavy descriptive writing, and I think that Susan Hill really recreated that here very much, yes. Also, there are definite moments where things are mentioned that are references to that original book, whether it's just the narrator is driving somewhere and she stops at this place to get a drink, and then she realises that when she was a child she stopped there and she bought this postcard of Mandalay, which is something that is only mentioned in passing in Rebecca. There were a number of other moments like that where there were like things included that I could tell. I was like, oh, Susan, I see that you got this from here. And I loved those moments. I thought they were really great, like little nods to the original. I think where I struggled with this one is I spent a lot of the book wondering what the point was. With Rebecca's Tale by Sally Beauman, I think it worked better for me because there was more of a drive. Rebecca's Tale is about unravelling the mystery of Rebecca. Who is this person? What was her background? You have a number of different perspectives that are different characters who are tangentially related, and they're sort of looking back and trying to uncover Rebecca's history. And I thought that one thing that did really well was where the original Rebecca is so defined by this person who is absent, and you're always getting Rebecca filtered through other people, and you have lots of different people's idea of who Rebecca was, and it really like haunts the text. And Rebecca's Tale, I think, did a really great job of like picking up on those things. And once more, we have another text that is so deeply concerned with an absent figure and with the different ways that people can perceive the same person and that sort of thing. So Rebecca's Tale, whilst it wasn't a perfect book for me, I felt like it had like a drive and a purpose to it. I understood that we had returned to this text to sort of unravel a potential mystery about this figure who is so present. This one had a lot less of a plot to it. This isn't a spoiler because Rebecca starts with the narrator being like, we live on the continent now, let me tell you all about how we there, and then like she goes back and like tells you all about it. This is 10 years after, but I felt like our narrator still hasn't grown as a character. She feels very much the same. Like, even though she's 10 years older, she's still very, like, gawky, uncomfortable with things. At times, she's able to stand up to people in a way that she previously would not have, but that's not a consistent thing. She still feels very, like, overwhelmed a lot, and that sort of thing, which maybe is just a aspect of her character, but I don't know, I felt like it didn't feel like 10 years had passed. It felt like all the characters were the same. They were just physically older. I don't know. Equally, it just took a really long time for anything to happen. The book opens with Maxim and the narrator returning to England to attend a funeral of someone who was a character in the first book. And then it sort of goes from there, and once more it appears like our narrator is being haunted by Rebecca, which raises these questions of like, but Rebecca is dead, who is it who is doing these things? It's just that, for how, maybe it's just that I would like this to have been a slightly shorter book. I think it might have been a bit more impactful if there was less of it, because there are just great swathes of time in this where like nothing has really happened. And I understand that the original Rebecca, in some ways, you could say, also has a similar thing. Maybe it was just the execution of the original one worked better for me, I don't know. So I thought that there was some good writing in this from like a objective standpoint. It's just that I felt like this lacked any drive. I felt like the characters really lacked any like progression. I also had some mixed feelings about the ending. I don't know. Not the actual what happened itself, but the way that it is like framed. I don't know. One of those things that's a bit tricky to talk about without going into huge spoilers for both the original book and this. But suffice to say, this didn't work as successfully for me. I know this is a very divisive book and people tend to either like love it or hate it. I don't hate this, and I don't hate the concept of going back and writing sequels to books. It's just sometimes I find myself questioning why this was a story that this person felt like it needed telling, when actually I didn't feel like there was that much story present. You know? That said, there are a lot of people on Goodreads who left glowing reviews who loved it, and honestly I do think that there are a lot of people who will love this book. It's just, it didn't quite work for me, and I didn't quite understand the necessity of it. To move on to my non-fiction books, I'll start with a reread. This is Eat Up by Ruby Tandoh, Food, Appetite and Eating What You Want. This is the first time I've reread this. I read it for the first time a number of years ago, and I gave it 5 stars, and I loved it. I've been getting so into cooking lately. It's really been getting me through, like, life. So I thought this would be the perfect time, especially off the heels of reading Midnight Chicken, which I will have wrapped up in a book chat at some point in the past. I've bumped that up to a 5-star because I keep returning to that and rereading my favourite bits of it. So I thought, let's try this one again and see how I feel. My original rating holds up. I think that this is a really great series of essays on food writing. I love the approach that Ruby Tandoh has to food. It's very much a non-judgmental, quite empowering attitude to food, I think. She really strips away a lot of these judgments and things that we attach to our attitude towards food. She examines the way that sometimes food writing and the way that food is talked about can be very classist, it can be very ableist. She looks at relationships between food and class, food and sexuality, and I just think that this is such a gorgeous, positive way of singing the praises and the joy of food, and how much food is a presence in our life and can bring us joy and help us during moments when we feel sad. She examines some more political things, such as the way that like food in prisons is dealt with, and the lack of quality there. She talks about food in film. She covers such a broad range of things, and I think that she does it in a way that's very thoughtful, that's very considered, and that really is acknowledging like we all have our own personal relationships to food that can be very messy, that can be very tricky, and how can we work at stripping all these judgments and these values away and embrace food for what it is, as something that sustains us, that gives us life, that can be a source of joy. I think it's wonderful, and I loved it very much, and I had a really great time rereading it. Next up is Trans Love, an anthology of transgender and non-binary voices, edited by Freiya Benson. This is a wonderful collection that is all themed around the concept of love. It explores a number of different types of love, which cover part 1 is sex and relationships, part 2 is non-binary love, part 3 is faith and belief, part 4 is family and friendship, part 5 is self-love, and part 6 is love and all of us, which is mainly author biographies. I thought this was brilliant. I love the concept of this, which is pretty much covered in the introduction, where Freiya Benson talks about, like, love is a human right, and someone's gender identity being trans, being non-binary, that doesn't make you undeserving of love, which is a narrative that is sometimes pushed. And this is really working to unpack that. There's a whole variety of voices in here. that are all exploring their own personal experiences. This means that there is a variety of like form and style and that sort of thing, which I found really interesting. The joy of an anthology is that if one essay's writing style doesn't quite work for you, you can just go on to the next one. There was one in here that is very stream of consciousness. I talk about all the time. I really struggle with stream of consciousness books, especially if there's no punctuation. So like that essay might not have quite worked for me. Just move on to the next one. Had a great time. I think that when you are talking about something as personal as love, especially in all of these different forms, you know, there's almost like a privilege aspect where I feel like quite privileged to have been able to read all of these people being so honest and so forthright about themselves and their experiences and that sort of thing. It feels like an honour to sort of get like such personal, deep insights into people. I thought this did a really wonderful job, and also like it doesn't shy away from exploring the difficult and messy sides. There are some voices in this that have really struggled with accepting that they're deserving of love, or having people that they love unconditionally suddenly realising that their love for you is conditional, and it's conditional upon you not being yourself. You know, these are topics that are explored in this. I just wanted to mention that because although I think that this is immensely valuable, and I think that trans and non-binary people coming to this and reading this will find a lot of comfort and a lot of joy in it, I do also just want to clarify that there are some essays that do not shy away from dealing with these topics, so that might be something that you just need to like, just, you know, prep yourself for before you go in. But yeah, I thought this was fantastic. I love the concept at the heart. I thought it was executed really well. There's definitely voices in here that I'm now excited to like go off and explore further. Finally is a new favourite. This is Gathering Moss, A Natural and Cultural History of Mosses by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I read Braiding Sweetgrass in 2020. It was one of my favourite non-fiction books of 2020, potentially my favourite because I loved it so much. This is Robin Wall Kimmerer's other book. Robin Wall Kimmerer is an Indigenous American citizen Potawatomi tribe nation member. She's also a botanist with a speciality in mosses. Similar to Braiding Sweetgrass, this is a collection of different essays upon different topics. I had the most fabulous time reading this. I love moss. I don't understand moss, but I love it. And so I wanted to read this because I wanted to understand moss more. And I felt like this had a lot of actual, real, solid, like, scientific knowledge that I have now learned from it. Am I going to remember it all? Probably not. Hence why I will be rereading this probably a number of times throughout my life to, like, reaffirm all of that knowledge. But there are diagrams in this that show you the different mosses and the different things that are being discussed. There was a lot of actual, like, scientific knowledge, like how do mosses reproduce, that sort of thing. Like, I have just learnt so much about mosses, and that makes me so thrilled. But in the similar style to Braiding Sweetgrass, it is done in such a beautifully written way, and it's also dealing with a number of other topics at the same time. Some of the essays that have most stayed with me so far, there was one about how she was hired to be consultant for this extremely rich man who is trying to build this garden, which is billed to her as being like reaffirming like the native plant species and that sort of thing. So it's like billed as this like rewilding almost project, except for actually it is someone who is so, say, passionate about mosses and that sort of thing, but it's actually about power and it's about ownership. And this guy wants to have a perfect moss garden, but he doesn't want to listen to her, and he doesn't actually want to listen to how long it actually takes for mosses to grow successfully, the ways that you cannot get certain mosses to cohabit, because that's not how it works. This person doesn't want to acknowledge all of these. They just want to own things. They want to own a moss garden, so they can talk about how they own a moss garden, but they don't care about how mosses actually work. Which I found to be very relevant to life in general. Also, there was a gorgeous one. The very end one is about this beautiful moss that's nicknamed Goblin's Gold, and how it grows in these little caves, and it gets like one little flash of sunlight every day as the sun sets, and then it glows in the dark like gold. And I just, it really touched me. This is a rambly way of saying that I continue to adore the way that she weaves together beautiful poetic writing, examining much broader, wider topics that really connect to like us as humans and the things we value and that sort of thing, with like such a solid knowledge of science. And it was a pleasure to read. It was a pleasure to understand mosses more. And I really value this, and she's definitely a new favourite writer, and this is definitely a new favourite book. So if you are like me, and you want to know more about mosses, I would heartily recommend it. That's everything I wanted to talk about this week. As per usual, I would love to know if you've read any of these. Please do leave me a comment down below and let me know. Otherwise, I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will see you next time for something different.